Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of Loading Complete. My name is Brian Munt. I'm going to be your host for this very short show. I anticipate it being a short show, and now watch, it's going to be 58 minutes long. I am joined again this week by John Guida, our resident Destiny expert. How is it going, John?
Splendid.
All right, so I wanted to do a follow-up, and this is going to be probably one of the last Destiny discussions that we have. And the reason that I wanted to reconvene is because my opinion of Destiny 2 has changed very radically over the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, since we last did the podcast. And now I alluded to some of this in our normal show, Loading Complete, the episode available right now, so you can hear some of my basic thoughts on Destiny 2. But, you know, I wanted to talk to somebody about this, and I'll start by giving you my opinion, Jay, and maybe you feel the same way, maybe you don't. Destiny 2, when it first starts out, it really rewards the new player. So you are constantly gaining the hard levels. You're leveling up from 1 to 2 to 3 all the way up to 20. You are constantly finding new and much more powerful weapons. So it starts with rares, but each rare you find seems to be a little bit better. And then it goes to legendaries, and each legendary you find seems to be a little bit better. And there is a reason to keep playing. And each one of those new weapons radically increases your light level. And it felt, at least in the early stage, that everything was moving forward. It felt like progress. It felt like, okay, I'm going to play this game for 20 minutes, and you know what? I'm going to actually do something. I'm going to make some progress. And my problem with the game is it seems really front heavy. So all of that progress, all of that progression system is in the first part of the game and not necessarily the second. So right now I'm really close to max light. I haven't hit 300 yet, but it sort of doesn't matter. I mean, right? It really doesn't matter.
It doesn't seem to, no.
And you know, I've stopped finding weapons that are more powerful because everything is now capped. I have stopped finding gear that is interesting because I have most of the items in the game, or I've gotten them at one point. Mm-hmm. There are a few exotics I don't have, but that's it. And then there's, frankly, there's nothing to do. Multiplayer is not really grabbing me the way that I hoped it would. And
it's too bare bones.
It is. It's really bare bones. And you think of Bungie traditionally and the multiplayer that they have created traditionally, and I think what the Destiny 2 multiplayer lacks is that same scope, right?
I mean, even compared to the first Destiny you could pick whatever game mode you wanted to play. It was 6-on-6. It was more dynamic. Now it's just kind of, you have the quick play, you have the competitive, and you're stuck. And
you're thrown into a hopper of matches. You don't really get to pick and choose which game type. But I mean, what do you think? What do you think about that? Do you think the game is front loaded? Now, you played way too much of Destiny. I'm going to just go out and say it. It drove me crazy how much you were playing that game. But you were a big fan. You played for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, all the DLCs, everything, and Are you still entertained by this? Are you getting bored?
I'm getting bored, yes. I'm getting bored for several reasons. The first, and recently in an interview with Destiny 2's creative leader, Luke Smith, he confirmed some things for us, that they're working on various whatevers that they can't talk about yet, which doesn't really help out
You
anybody.
Always love that vague promise.
Yeah, I know, soon, as they constantly said in the first Destiny. But yes, one of the biggest complaints that I have heard is the lack of random weapon rolls.
Right. And now, for people that don't necessarily know, who maybe didn't play the original Destiny, when you hit max light, when you hit max level, when you didn't really have anything else to do in the game because you went through the raid, you did the nightfalls each week, you everything else, you would be able to get random rolls on weapons. So if you found, say, I don't know, what's a weapon from the original Destiny?
Grasp of Malak.
Okay, you found that stupid named weapon, and it didn't necessarily have the stats that you wanted. You could keep playing and keep playing and keep playing until you found one with better stats.
Yes, you found one that fit your playing style, whether it was an Ias Luna and Crucible, the Grasp of Malak, which was a strike-specific weapon, which also Destiny 2, no strike-specific loot, big bummer. It just, if you had everything, you could just keep grinding for a chance at that quote-unquote God-tier weapon roll that you could then take into PvP, dominate, feel powerful with, and that's just not here.
So let me ask you, was that part of the main reason why you continued with the original Destiny, why you played it that much?
Part of it, yes. I get addicted to getting things. Pulling that one-armed bandit, the constant slot machine, trying to get...
You would love loot boxes, by the way.
Oh,
I'm just kidding. Nobody loves loot boxes. By the way, I'm just going to interrupt you. On the normal episode of Loading Complete this week, I have a whole segment about loot boxes, so that's why I bring it up. But okay, I'm sorry. Continue, Jay.
So it just seems very, I don't know, just unsatisfying. Every time you get a weapon, it'll be exactly the same as the weapon you got before, maybe a little bit more powerful if you've increased your light in the in-between time. But yeah, I mean, for weapons, there are just kinetic mods that you can add to your primary, and then just the elemental.
And again, but those are all stable, right? They're all static. So it's like 5 up.
Yeah,
it
that's
increases
all it is.
the level of your weapon 5, and that's it. So you can't necessarily, like re-roll for different mods or anything. You can't combine mods in unique ways at all. It's just...
Again, Destiny, the crew behind the game, and Luke Smith have gone on record as saying that they've had some wonderful ideas about that, but they had a deadline to meet, so they put the game out, and they're going to hopefully add that. But it just doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth. It's just kind of sour.
Yeah. And it's weird because when I first started this game, it really hooked me. I mean, it really legitimately hooked me. And that over the course of 3 weeks, I was really into that game. I was playing that game nonstop.
Yeah,
and it felt like the progress was continuing, and it was... If you played for 5 minutes, you'd be like, oh, look, I raised my light 3 points or whatever. And you could actually point to something on your character or on a weapon or whatever it was and say, look, like I did this.
I know, for 5 seconds, you got a little bit further than I did as far as light level.
Right, which is crazy because I hated the original game. And it feels to me like this game is an example of overcorrecting. And there were so many things wrong with the original Destiny that I can understand how something like this would happen. They try to start with this blank slate, and they take all the complaints of the original Destiny into account, and then they overcorrect. It's almost like when you lose control of the car and you're veering to the right and you just crank the wheel all the way to the left. And I think that's what happened here. Whereas the first part of the game, the front of the game, they loaded for new players.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you get that endorphin rush when you find that new weapon or you increase your level or whatever it is, and you constantly have a goal. But it's like a bell curve, right? What happens is as you progress further into the game, the rewards get fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer to the point where it's almost a complete vertical line.
Indeed, I mean there really isn't that carrot on the end of the stick to keep you playing. I'm starting to understand, with the game being as front-heavy as it is, why Bungie released the raid about a week in. Maybe they probably know that it's a little front-heavy, I would guess. And not only that, too, the raid is also one of my gripes, because in the original Destiny, you played the raid to get the best gear. Here, the gear that drops in the raid is not higher. It's not different. It doesn't have unique perks that work in the raid like in the original game. In Crota's End, for instance, the second raid that came out, the raid weapons, I believe some of them does more damage against Hive Wizards or does more damage against Hive Majors. There's nothing here. It just looks different, so you can kind of parade around like, ooh, look at me. I have all of this raid-themed loot that doesn't really do anything except show off that you did it. And now, just yesterday, I believe, they finally released the Prestige raid after delaying it a week because there was they say, a game-breaking glitch that players could take advantage of.
And yet, they still are, aren't they?
They released it anyway. In the Bungie Weekly Update, it was stated that they were looking at fixes, and the fix that they could do in the time that they had would cause more damage than it would correct. So they're still looking into it, but they didn't bother correcting it for those reasons. But with the Prestige raid, there are just a couple of things you can get now. The gear has a slightly different color scheme. You get an emblem that's rare, not a legendary emblem, when completing it, and the raid-specific shotgun just gets an exotic ornament. There's nothing else. It doesn't raise your light level. It's just a little bit more difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whereas the original re-rolling for weapons in the original, right? Trying to find that like what you said, god tier weapon, that almost adds a little bit of personality to those weapons.
It does, but a lot of people think that Bungie was trying to cater towards PvP, and given how bare bones PvP is, it leaves me scratching my head if that's the case, because you go into Crucible with a weapon that you just got, you think it's good, but it's not that good, and you keep getting killed by other people. So you finally get that god tier weapon, and everybody grinds to get it, so you get a bunch of people with these god-rolled weapons just killing people left and right in the Crucible, and then people go and they complain to Bungie that it's unfair that this weapon needs a nerf, and it was just constant nerfs in Destiny 1. There were a few buffs, but more nerfs than anything else. So it's almost like they've listened to the crybabies in that respect.
Mm-hmm. If this game, you're still playing it.
Yes.
If this game is going to... First of all, do you think this game is going to hook you as much as the original?
Not unless something changes.
What needs to change for it to hook you like the first one did?
Well, first, if the static rolls on weapons are going to stay, as Luke Smith just recently said, they have to do something with weapon mods to inject more personality. Because they've also gone on record as saying that they wanted to make, like Better Devils, it's a hand cannon you get from Crucible. They wanted to make the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 10th Better Devils you get interesting in some way. But I just don't see that happening right now, unless if you dismantle it, you get something that you can put into...
Level up that specific weapon again, maybe?
Or add something to it, tweak the stats. I don't know, but it just isn't there. I have 3 characters now, each different class. My weakest is my Warlock at 300 light. My other 2, my Hunter and my Titan, are at 303. And it's not keeping me playing like the first one did.
Yeah, I feel almost misled, if that makes sense, by the first part of the game. I thought, man, they have listened to everything that I complained about, and they fixed it. And whereas in the original one, the game almost started after you had done everything in it, right? The game really started after you had reached max light, after you had reached max level.
That was just Bungie speak for the grind starts now.
Right, but a lot of people really like the end game. And here the end game seems so lacking, and I've gone from this incredible fan of how the game started to this apathy. I have this apathy towards the game.
Yeah, you don't really like it. You don't really hate it. It's just kind of meh, which is probably the worst thing you can say about a game at any one specific point. It's because if it's just meh, you don't really care. You have nothing to keep you engaged at all. So my opinion on this is that it seems that the first Destiny hemorrhaged quite a few players after those first few weeks. If you remember the pre-sale numbers and everything, sky high. Mm-hmm. The game sold on Bungie's legacy, basically. And here now, it seems to be catered toward casual players. A lot of the casual players left the first game, it seems to me. And the hardcore players, I don't know if I would call myself hardcore because there are people out there that are way more hardcore than I am, kept playing and keeping the game alive and stuck around and kept giving feedback. And now those players that kept grinding and giving feedback and invested 3 years into the name of Destiny come into Destiny 2, and they find that after they've leveled up past the cap and done whatever, there really isn't anything else there to keep them going, to appease the hardcore crowd. And the people that kept the game alive came to Destiny 2 looking for more of the same or an improved presentation of that, and it's not here for endgame play.
Would you say it's dumbed down?
I would say it's dumbed down, yes.
Just in terms of like the weapons that you can't, that are all static.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's been. I mean, I like how some things have been streamlined. Definitely, it's not nearly as convoluted in both play and understanding as the first game was. But it just seems that after playing through 3 years of Destiny, you get attached. There's a heart and soul to what you're playing, and it doesn't seem like this has the same amount of depth that the first game had.
It's interesting that you say that, because one of my biggest complaints right now, and it just sort of crystallized in my mind, is perhaps the lack of personality that the game has. And I think the characters are well developed. Don't get me wrong. I think the story is decent. I especially liked the latter part of the story, the second half of the story. And I think that was done really, really well. But in terms of my character, in terms of my items, in terms of the way that I look, I don't feel like there's enough personalization there.
No, the addition of adding shaders and whatnot to guns and different parts of your outfit, nice. I don't quite like the way it was implemented with the one-time use, but
Little shady on that part. Little shady.
nice pun. I don't know. It's hard to articulate all these feelings I'm having at once. Granted, the first Destiny, it was 3 years of refinement on what was pretty.
It was a weak foundation
That they built upon.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to compare a game that was out for 3 years that received all these updates and refinements to a game that was just released. But at the same time, you wouldn't expect a company like Bungie to go back on certain things and take certain things out that you get used to. So, I mean, there are some things missing that I wish were there, again, like with Crucible, with pretty much
every aspect.
every aspect, yes, sadly. I mean, it's good, but it feels like it should be better than good.
Especially after all this time.
Yes.
After all the false starts and stops and all of that. Yeah, I think it should be better. And what's going to be very interesting to see is the DLC in December. That's what I'm looking forward to seeing. This might be, frankly, one of these games for me that I play when the DLC drops. I play it quite a bit when the DLC drops, for maybe 20, 30 hours, depending on how much content is in that piece of downloadable content. But it's not one of those games that I see. Maybe some will, because there are, the hardest of hardcore Destiny players out there, but I don't see the game really maintaining that player base between episodes of downloadable content. And maybe I am absolutely off base on that. And I'm just speaking from my own personal experience. I don't know what the hell I would do between those periods of new content.
No, I get what you're saying. Players that were a little bit spoiled after year one of Destiny when the Taken King dropped, because that was downloadable content that was good, whereas the first two DLCs, The Dark Below and House of Wolves, were just like 3 levels that you run backwards in the game, and then some endgame content tacked on. So that's really, I mean, the only thing that kept you busy was basically the equivalent of busy work. I don't mind grinding for something if I'm doing it of my own volition, my own free will. And
you have to make grinding worth it, you have to get rewarded for it.
Yes.
And right now, let me ask you this. Maybe I'm just missing something, but what is the reward for the grind right now?
For me, there really isn't any.
For not even for you, just at large. What is the reward for the grind?
The satisfaction of a job well done.
Well, right. You know what I mean? Like, even the if maybe I'm wrong about this, but even Crucible isn't ranked or anything, is it?
I don't believe so. If there is any aspect of the game that keeps track of what's going on, it's done behind the scenes. I know there was a lot in the first Destiny. There were third-party sites you could go to track things a little bit more thoroughly in terms of ELO and whatnot. But
what's ELO?
ELO, it's a number assigned to you. Every time you kill somebody, you receive a certain amount of ELO, and every time somebody kills you, they take some away. So the higher it is, the better a player you are.
Okay.
And my ELO, I mean, my KD was maybe just over a 1, so not that good. I'm not the sort of person that can just carry the whole team. So, but anyway, back to the game with Crucible. I mean, it's just... It just rubs me the wrong way.
It does. It does, yeah. The worst part for me is grinding with no end in sight, with no reward. That is not fun for me, and that becomes a chore. And I don't like playing games that are chores.
No, I don't.
My wife gives me enough chores. So,
yeah, I suppose.
all right. Well, I think that's about it. It's a discussion that I thought we should have. It's a game that I feel slightly deceived by, to be totally honest with you.
Not quite as deceived as the first game when it dropped.
No, and don't get me wrong, okay? Because I more than got my $60 worth out of Destiny 2.
As have I.
I played that game for dozens and dozens of hours. So I have got my money's worth out of that game, and I think it's a great value. I had a blast. But, what they have delivered and their messaging are two totally separate things. And they expect people to keep playing this game and playing it and playing it and playing it every day, but it doesn't have the content to keep doing that. It doesn't give people the incentive to keep doing that. So
no, not really.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, John. And I'm sure we'll have you back when the DLC drops, and that'll be fun.
Look forward to it.
All right. Now, if you haven't listened to the regular Loading Complete episode this week, you're definitely going to want to listen to that. We talk about augmented reality. I give my thoughts on Cuphead, my very enthusiastic thoughts, as well as my thoughts on Middle-earth: Shadow of War. We talk loot boxes. We talk. You might hear some table slamming or some yelling when I'm talking about loot boxes, but we do talk about loot boxes, and I think my approach might surprise a few people. My opinion might be radically different from yours. It probably is. So you're not going to want to miss that. If you have any Destiny questions, if you have any reactions to what we've said, if you think we are totally off base, you can always email me. It's loadingcompleteshow@gmail.com. That's loadingcompleteshow@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.